Julian Barnes, Wall Street Journal. I wondered if you could talk a little bit about NATO counterterrorism efforts beyond Iraq and Afghanistan. Secretary Pompeo, on his visit here to Brussels, talked again about how counterterrorism is important to the Trump administration. We're going to hear from the President and the Secretary General tomorrow. But can you characterize a little bit about what you discussed today, what new initiatives that NATO is going to do to address this problem? And just as a related matter, the command structure review was very much oriented to problems about the East, the logistics command for moving material across the continent, the Atlantic command for defending sea lanes. But does it really do anything that addresses the concerns of southern-facing allies of the counterterrorism problem?
I'll take it if you want.
Go ahead. Yeah.
First of all, when you look at counterterrorism, obviously our ability to project stability with building capabilities, as we're going to do in Iraq, as we're planning to expand in Iraq as a part of this. Afghanistan, the same thing. We work with Tunisia, Jordan, and other places in the same, with the same perspective. We work hard on the exchange of information sharing, and how to break the barriers that we have, both within NATO and with our partners. Every place you go around the globe, that's one of the toughest things having to do with information and intel, the difference between military information and that's within the civilian governance realm. Those are the things that we work on. And our headquarters actually, by nature of the way that they're structured and what we train on, given the environment that we live in today, works on being able to produce that kind of analysis and help other nations as well as their civilian side where we can with information flow and analysis of information. So that's part of it. I would tell you the hub, by its very nature, it is focused on the South, but it's focused on transnational threats of all kinds. That helps us with this CT environment as well. To the NCS question, I would just say that it's, we tend to focus toward the East because you see the largest pieces that this within the NCS. The two new large headquarters are oriented largely on getting back into a peer competitor and a very dynamic environment. But actually, the NCS has very carefully been structured so that it does respond 360 to all three of our core missions that we have. The hub is one specifically that has to do with the South. But the changes that we've made internal to each of those headquarters were to respond to the challenges in today's environment, like cyber, like information, the need to connect between our strategic, operational, and NATO force structure, et cetera. That's built into the entire command structure. And those things apply just as importantly to efforts in the South and those challenges as it does to a peer competitor challenge that we look at in the East, is how I'd respond to that. We very much focused on the ability to do that.
If I can just complement that, yes. We have developed very recently a concept for counterterrorism, which goes beyond, as you mentioned, Afghanistan and Iraq, with three main chapters regarding assessment, engagement, and the capabilities we need. And just for your second question, when we look at the necessity to organize the logistics in secure zero war, it's not only for a threat that could come from the south. We still have in the strategic concept the possibility, the necessity to be able to engage 2 major joint and 6 small joint operations together. If we had to engage a few operations together, the organization of the logistics in the full AOR will be a very important task as well. So this decision is not only focused on the threat that could come from the east.
Oh, sorry. Can I think? Oh, can I go to
Terry,
you?
okay, Terry, go
sorry, thank you. Terry Schultz with NPR and Deutsche Welle. To follow up on Julian's question, to be fair, those are things that you have done. Those are advancements you have made. But President Trump says he wants more, that NATO can do more against counterterrorism. So I think what we're looking for is what more can you do than the accomplishments you've just reviewed?
I would tell you that we are doing some of those things now, but we're going to do them better. That's part of this this adaptation. I see you smiling, but headquarters today have got to be dramatically different in their agility and their skills than they were yesterday. And those things make a difference in counterterror. You go to any intelligence center today, okay, and you look at what they're striving to do in terms of fusion, that's what we've got to build. And the United States is still trying to perfect those skills and how better to do that. So, I would tell you that it isn't about a thing. It isn't necessarily about, a new headquarters of some kind. It's improving the skills that are internal to the headquarters we have. Secondly, we're a part of the coalition. Now, that's happened since, last year as well. NATO is a part of the headquarters, as a part of that coalition. That's a difference. Because what it does is it gives us that coordination and participation in the coalition on a daily basis that we didn't have before. It was only done individually by nations. So those are some of the things that we're looking at, and we'll continue to get better and make a difference in that counterterror fight as well. The last thing I'll say is that as you know, this threat is 360. There's not a nation in Europe that doesn't have a concern about transnational threats or terrorist threats. So again, when we design this NATO command structure and we look at it, we've got to be able to look at that 360, and we've got to look at not only the external threat, but the internal threat and how we help our nations secure themselves.
I would probably add one more thing, and it's to do more in counterterrorism is not just killing more terrorists. It's much broader. And we spent about a third of our time today discussing issues of the South. And they are not just what we have done, but they are about the plans that are ahead of us. And they include a number of training activities with the partners in the region to increase their resilience and capacity to deal with these issues with our assistance. I think the range of measures that we are taking and are going to take is quite broad, and southern nations have addressed all their challenges and all their concerns, and they approved the way ahead. So I can tell you that they are happy with the way ahead that we have taken.
Front row over here, please.
Hi, I'm Jamie McIntyre. I'm with the Washington Examiner. As little as 6 months ago, we were getting very upbeat assessments from U.S. commanders in Afghanistan in the briefings that we got at the Pentagon. The new strategy was called a game changer, and one of the generals said he thought we'd turn the corner in Afghanistan. Today, we see that the Afghan forces are in a tough fight with the Taliban. So my question to you, General Scaparrotti, is threefold. One is, do you think we've turned the corner in Afghanistan, or how would you describe it? Two, what kind of progress do you think is reasonable to expect this year in Afghanistan? And the last part is, what more does NATO need to do to ensure that that progress is achieved?
To ensure the progress, I would tell you that we need to continue our resolve. We need to continue the manning and the capabilities that we've committed to, which we still need some that I would like to see nations fulfill to bring that commander to his full requirement. That would be very helpful. Secondly, I would tell you, I don't typically use turn the corner or something like that. This is a tough fight. It's going to be a long fight. I've always believed that. I've served there a couple times as a commander. But I think the plan that we have in place, and importantly, the Afghan roadmap, which is theirs. I mean, I know that. I've talked to President Ghani and heard him describe it. It's their plan. I think it's right. I think it's got a good perspective. And I think their subordinates actually are committed to executing that. That is different, and I think that's one of the differences here with what we've gone into this past year and we're moving into now. And so we want to see them execute that roadmap. This will be a year that I think you see a second, what I would expect to see is a second year where the Afghan forces are successful in leading that fight and decreasing the ability of Taliban to operate throughout their fighting season, and being in a position to continue to improve that plan and get ready for the next one. We did that last year. You know, today, for instance, you see the violence that started the summer campaign. But at this point this year, we're 15% below any point at the start of a campaign for the last 5 years overall in violence at this time. And we're below the norm for the amount of attacks or violence for the start of a campaign, in particular, the precise period that it started. So while you see the high-profile ones, what you don't see below that in context is their ability to do it in a broad way, to have the capacity or the op-tempo that they've shown in the past. And we know that they're struggling some in their chain of command, et cetera. So from my perspective, we see the Afghans carrying this fight forward well enough that at the other end, we've had a second year of putting pressure on the Taliban, and enough pressure that as we look to the future, what would I hope to see is more of them coming to the table for reconciliation. And we have to get to a negotiated point. And that's the whole point of the roadmap, is to build capacity and put that kind of pressure on.
If I might, I would like to add one point, and it's more civilian than military. And I think it's quite a new phenomenon, which we heard recently at the meeting here in Brussels of Ministers of Foreign Affairs, both from military commander as well as from senior civilian representative. And it's growing dissatisfaction or frustration of Afghan public with the protracted conflict, and the growth of peace movements and pressure on local authorities as well as on government to end the conflict. And also the high visibility attacks take a lot of attention of international media, but at the same time they are cutting support to Taliban internally. So the situation is changing slowly even in Afghan society. So the move towards ending the conflict is very much different from what we learned over the last couple of years.
Irina, Union, please.
Ukrainian news agency Union, Irina Sommer. Question for you, General Pavel. This is your last press conference, and I do believe I am allowed to ask a question on a little bit different topic. And because I'm Ukrainian, it's obvious it will be on Ukraine. After all these years working with Ukrainians, what will be your advice to your successor, how to deal with this partner? And second part of my question, recently you were in Ukraine. Can you please tell us what is in your report to North Atlantic Council? What is your conclusion? Thank you.
I will be very brief. I think the best way ahead is to continue the path that we have set on, and it's to make Ukraine successful both militarily and economically, because this is the best answer to a Russian approach to Ukraine. So we will continue supporting Ukrainian armed forces to be modern, capable, and having a good deterrent effect. We will also support Ukraine through a number of means within this comprehensive package that we have for Ukraine, including financial support, institutional support, political support. And we will keep pressing Russia to comply with international norms. And my report about the visit in Ukraine was a very positive assessment on the progress that the Ukrainian armed forces are doing on the path of reforms. Because even though it may look slow for some who are not informed, actually the progress that they are doing is quite remarkable.
Jim, please, last question.
Hi, Jim Garamone with DoD News. All three of you gentlemen mentioned Trident Juncture, and obviously you attach a lot of importance to it. What lesson do you hope Russia gets from this exercise and exercises like it?
Well, the first thing I'll say briefly is just, it's a part of our deterrence of Russia. It's a demonstration of our capability and how we see the world and what we're able to do. And it's simply that. It's a deterrent message.
And to add to that, we do not have so many opportunities to have very large live exercise where we deploy real troops. I mentioned more than 40,000. And this is a good demonstration of, first, our unity. This is a demonstration of the way we work even with partners, because a few partner nations will be engaged. And this is a good demonstration of our interoperability. And that's very important to make this demonstration that when we are 29, we are not less performant than one, we are much more. And that's the message we intend to send through Trident Juncture 80.
And if I could send just one other is that, and I've emphasized this before, if you look at our exercise compared to what Russia does, for instance, this is an exercise that's focused on defense, and it's a defense of the sovereign nations that are part of NATO. That's what we do. And that's what this will represent as well.
And even though I haven't mentioned the exercise, but I will add one sentence, and it's that by having this exercise, we will fully comply with all the norms and obligations in terms of Vienna process.
Thank you very much for coming to this press conference. Thank you.